everyone. Hope you all had a nice lunch. Thank you for coming back and joining us. Just a quick show of hands. Who was here for this morning's session? Great few in the room. Brilliant. Okay, so there's some thought that's gone into this, obviously. There's a bit of continuity in here. So there was a slide with some squiggly lines on it in the last presentation from Nigel, which talked about the fact that we all sort of use different metrics to measure ourselves. And I was just sort of talking to John and Sharon about this, in that even in my organization, in a sales team, we have our sales metrics, right? And we've got to sell some stuff. But then our pre-sales colleagues who we work with in the field every single day have different metrics. So, you know, one of the things I took away the most from this morning was, if you want to align your organization and actually get people to operate not just in silos, but actually start to collaborate and change the way they work and change the culture and enable digital transformation, one of the best ways to do it is with metrics. So I'm really, really pleased to welcome a very long-time supporter and customer of AppDynamics, Sharon Cooper, who's Chief Digital Officer at the British Medical Journal, and John Rakowski, who's Director of Product Marketing, onto the stage. A huge round of applause, please.
Excellent. Well, hope you all enjoyed again your lunch. So this session definitely does follow on from Nigel's. So Nigel talks about building a digital team and a digital business. And following on from that, metrics are absolutely key to guide you, to put you in the right direction, to show improvement in your business. Now, before I hand it over to kind of Sharon to go into a bit of background into BMJ, I want to kind of put one caveat straight away out there. If you've come to this session expecting both myself and Sharon to give you a complete blueprint about these are the metrics that you should be using in your organization, well, we're not going to do that. And there's a reason for this, because metrics, measurements, KPIs are absolutely key, or are absolutely centered on your business, on your people. What's the right metric for one organization may not be the right metric for another organization, even in the same industry, because it really depends on your people, your direction, and where you want to go. So that's the first caveat, but to hand it over, I'm going to hand it over to Sharon to give an introduction to BMJ.
So I thought I'd start with just explaining a little bit about what BMJ does, because it drives our metrics. BMJ has been at the heart of healthcare and has one mission, and that's to improve it worldwide, which for a very small publishing organization in the UK is quite a strong ambition. But we've been delivering insights about healthcare. We have been part of some of the biggest changes in healthcare since we started in 1847. And you can see some rather famous names there that we've helped bring their work to light. Our work changes, and it's changing more rapidly than ever. Academic publishing, which is where I'm based, is not bleeding edge technology, and yet we still need to compete in a digital world, and we need to understand how technology is changing our business as much as anyone else's. BMJ's metrics are not just about numbers. It's not just about whether the servers are up and running or how many customers or how many sales we make. We're a very, very values-driven business. We're owned by one of the big medical trade union here in the UK. We do things because we believe they're right. And trying to set metrics around those is really, really hard. We have a metric of patients come first. We have things like evidence matters, because those are actually what drive us and drive our business decisions as much as metrics. So one of the things we've been trying to do is work out how we drive our values into the way in which we analyze our performance. And every year we actually have ourselves audited by a third party to see how well we are performing against the values that we set ourselves. So back to John. Perfect.
So I want to start with the first important rule about metrics, probably the most important rule. Now, you probably all can see these screens. Who's been in this situation before? Show of hands. I think we all have, yeah? And we've all played the game, haven't we? Where you try and see how far you can get with that amber light on, haven't we? I know I've been caught out twice by this in my life, and it's annoying. But this slide highlights a really important first rule about metrics. That's the fact that while we can see a metric on the screen here, we've got 0, we've got an amber indicator, this measurement is important. But what's really important is the action that it provokes. Because we all know what we need to do. We need to find a petrol station at the next available opportunity. And that's key when it comes to metrics. When you're thinking about metrics, it is not just about thinking about the measurement, the KPI. What you should be thinking about is what action do you want to provoke? What action do you want your teams, your people to take next? Think about that first before you start thinking about the KPIs and the metrics and measurements for your business. So, in this session today, we're going to cover 3 areas. Firstly, we're going to cover 6 basics of metrics that everyone should understand. These are the fundamental foundations. These are something which, in every business, in every industry, you need to consider when it comes to metrics. Some of them are pretty basic, but it's important to kind of recap. Then we're going to have a look at key principles for the digital enterprise. We're going to touch back on some of the areas which David talked about in his keynote this morning. We're going to look at some of the areas which Nigel talked about in his session before lunch, because there is fundamental changes which are happening in business today. Digital transformation is real, it is happening, and you need to consider some of these changes in your business, and especially when you start to think about metrics. And then finally, we'll have a look at an example metrics plan. Again, we're not going to provide you with a blueprint, but we're going to provide you with an example of how to structure a metrics plan, the areas that you should be considering for your business. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So with that, over to you, Sharon, with the first important foundation.
So just to carry on the theme of journey, I wanted to just highlight a little tiny story about why accuracy is paramount. BMJ lives in this beautiful Lutyens building in London, built on the site of Charles Dickens' house, where he wrote a large number of his books. And therefore, our meeting rooms are named after Charles Dickens' characters, and our biggest meeting room is called the Havisham Room. The Havisham Room is the room that gets put into our calendars, and we send out invites. We had some very, very important visitors coming to see us. They were about to come and sign a deal with us. We knew they'd landed at Heathrow. They told us that they were on their way, didn't need any directions from us because they had it from the meeting invite. So they obviously put the Havisham Room into their sat-nav. And they ended up at the very delightful Havisham Tea Rooms in Milton Keynes. Couldn't work out why they couldn't find our office. So accuracy and making sure the accuracy of the information you give and receive is hugely important. And it's a slightly trivial example. But I think we were struggling with some of the other things, and we loved the journey acronym. So that was one of the really big lessons we learned around technology, about how you handle and set up your systems, but also around actually how you build metrics. Number 2 is about using numerical values, because then there's no argument. And that, again, for BMJ is very difficult when we talk about some of our more behavioral metrics, but we like to try and focus on numbers, on percentages. It allows you to see what you've done, what you've achieved, where you've come from, how far you are, and where you're going to go next. Some of those numbers are very, very difficult to work out, but I think I found certainly that with our team, in trying to come to an agreement about what the number is, or what the measurement is actually half the battle of determining the right metrics to measure your business.
Got a nice picture of a toilet on this one.
Yes, sorry. We don't usually go around photographing customers' toilets, I can assure you. But this is one of our biggest metrics. We publish a weekly journal. We distribute a couple of 100,000 copies of that a week, and that is one of our biggest corporate metrics. And the example I'm trying to give here is that common context and a shared metric is very important, but people have different views of that metric. And understanding that, so we have a single metric around how many copies we print a week. But our print distribution people, they just want to know how many copies we've got to print because they need to order enough paper. Because we print just in time, and we don't want to store lots, and we print on very, very specific, lovely paper that is very hard to get hold of. And so we need to make sure that we can manage that. So for them, the number of pages and the amount of copies we're printing is absolutely critical. For our display advertising people, they need to know how many pages they've got to fill with advertising each week and how many people are going to see that advert. For our membership services and our distribution, our customer service people, they need to know how many copies of that have dropped through a letterbox so they know how many phone calls they're going to receive from people who haven't got their subscription. But one of the biggest challenges we have is people tell us they read the BMJ every week religiously without fail. And yet you know there are lots and lots of copies sitting in their cellophane in a guilty pile. And eventually that guilty pile will fall over, they will open 2 or 3, they will read those, and then they'll put the rest in the bin. And understanding that is hugely important for us because readership of the content inside that journal is absolutely critical in terms of some of our other metrics, which I will come on to in a minute.
Excellent. So we understand that accuracy is paramount. We understand that numerical values are important and that common context is essential. So now we can start talking about the actual metrics themselves. And there's two types of metrics. One type we do very well in enterprise IT, and this is lagging metrics. Lagging metrics are descriptive metrics. They talk about something which has already happened. They're great for reporting progress, but what they don't do is actually promote new behavior, new direction. And this is why when you look at metrics, you need to look at two areas, both lagging and also leading metrics. So lagging metrics, which we're good at, are things like mean time between failure, mean time to resolution, user adoption per feature. Again, great for reporting progress. But for every lagging metric, you need to be focusing on a leading metric as well. So some examples here. If we're looking at improving mean time between failure, we may want to focus on percentage of testing use cases completed. Mean time to resolution, focusing on the percentage of identified bugs fixed. If we're looking at user adoption per feature, well, if you're an agile kind of business, an agile shop, then the number of stories completed per sprint, making sure you're aligning to those kind of customer or user requests. So the main rule is here, for every lagging metric, you need a leading metric to drive new behavior.
So as John has said earlier, metrics are specific to your business. I thought I'd just share with you the metrics that we have around the BMJ. We have 10 key metrics, and some of those I've already talked about. And some of those metrics are shared across all of our products. We have about 100 products in our portfolio, and usage is a big driver factor for every single one of those. And also some of the other metrics that you can see there. But there are some very, very unique metrics to our business. We're in the journals business. Impact factor is an absolutely unique factor, thing that most of you will probably never have heard of, but it's to do with the way in which academic research is judged. And the higher the impact factor of a journal, the more likelihood that somebody is going to get a research grant. And so publishing in the high impact factor journals becomes a major part of how they actually get the money in order to fund the research. And every journal in the world has an impact factor. And getting that up every single year is one of the biggest things that any journal has to do. And it drives a huge amount of behavior in an organization like ours. But heading back to our values, some of the metrics that we've set ourselves are about changing behavior. And that's changing behavior within governments, within healthcare institutions, and with individual patients as well. So the number of media mentions is really critical. It's a huge metric for us. But it's not about the number of mentions on fruit diets that we get in the Daily Mail, which we get quite a lot of. It will be about the number of mentions about bribery and corruption in India, in the Times of India, or it'll be about mentions around practices around childcare in China. Those are big things because those are mentions in the press that actually start to change and influence policy. We spend quite a lot of time in front of parliamentary committees, and that's another metric we set ourselves, is how much influence we have in changing healthcare policy, because that's what we have set ourselves out to do, because that's what drives improving healthcare. And then we have some other ones about, which device is being used at which time. We've got technical ones. There are the ones that sit behind some of the usage, sit on top of technology objectives and metrics around availability. So that's what makes up, and we track those every quarter, and we've kind of divided them into a number of different categories, so you can see their reach, impact, and influence, and those all drive up through our editorial strategy and into the corporate mission. And that's a really important part of how we think about our business and where metrics sit for us.
Excellent. So number 6, probably the most important foundation or element here, is that the right metrics really do help you to become a better leader. So on the screen, there's a number of famous football players. I think, does everyone know who these are? Hopefully. So you've got David Beckham, you've got Paul Scholes, probably one of the most gifted English midfielders in my time. You've got Gary Neville, and you've also got Eric Cantona, somebody who I grew up watching, amazing kind of talent. The thing is, while all these players were individually talented, there's no question about that. It could be argued that without one person, they wouldn't have been as successful. You can look at the form of Manchester United over the last couple of years, and there's been a dip. And this one person is Sir Alex Ferguson. And the great thing about this is that you're probably thinking, well, Sir Alex Ferguson, how did he use metrics? He was an old school manager. He was pretty old school. But every week when he used to watch training at Carrington, he'd stand just by the sidelines. His coaches would take the training sessions, and he would just watch. He'd look for visual cues. Which player was putting in the most effort in the training session that week? Who was taking on advice from each of the coaches? So he was using visual cues to actually decide who played in the team that Saturday. So he used metrics. And so that's what's key. So the right metrics can definitely help you become a better leader. So we've gone through a number of areas here. But just to recap, number 1, accuracy is paramount. Number 2, always use numerical values. Number 3, common context is essential. Number 4, you need a balance between leading and lagging metrics. They go hand in hand, they go together. Number 5, metrics are completely specific to your business. While we're all being impacted by digital, the reality is where you're going, where your team is going, what you want to achieve as a digital leader is specific to your business. And number 6, the right metrics can definitely help you become a better leader. So, before we start looking at a metrics plan and give you an example of how to build one, it's important to recap what's going on in the digital enterprise. What principles are impacting the way we do business today? Some of this is a bit of a recap from the keynote this morning and Nigel's previous session, but it's important to have this at the front of our minds when we're developing the metrics for our business. So the first one, I'm going to hand it over to you, Sharon, in terms of talking about this change from systems of record to systems of engagement.
Sure. So in my last sort of 4 years at BMJ, I've seen a huge amount of change being driven by moving from thinking about IT as a support factor to thinking about it being a driver of new product development and innovation. I think you can all think of your systems around what your SLAs are around your uptime. And that's great. And you might have a 99.98% SLA. But the problem is when the customer has hit your site in the 0.02% of the time that it's not there. And that for us can be absolutely critical because that might be the only time they come to see us. They only want one research article from us. It's the only opportunity we have to talk to them. And guess what? We weren't available when they wanted us. So thinking about that, about how you change those metrics from being focused on the back-end systems to being focused on the customer. Thinking about how much it costs versus how much is that infrastructure and those things driving revenue for your business, and can you actually make the link between the two of them? Using AppDynamics, we have, over the last 3 years that we've been using it, used it to really, really drive a lot of real-time analysis. We can see, when we were trying to move data center, that there was no opportune time for us to switch off a server and move it, because even at the most dead time of the night, there were still 15 or 20 people logging in and using our applications. And without that kind of insight and that kind of detailed analytics and data, you don't make the right decisions. And so for us, having those sorts of metrics right the way down, all the way through our infrastructure stacks was driving the decision about when we would communicate to customers, how we would impact the customer's usage of our systems in terms of making a major infrastructure change. And I think one of the other things that I've seen is the change in focus of my exec colleagues and the board that I work to around IT and technology. Everyone can be a publisher. Everyone in our company thinks they're a software developer and they can all build websites and they can all go out and buy technology to do what they need to do. And that's fantastic and it's lovely. And some of them do a really good job and some of them don't. But when you're working in a world like that with the consumerization of IT, everyone has an input, everyone has a say, and actually trying to make all of that work and make the whole thing hang together means it does become a much bigger and broader conversation about metrics and just thinking about cybersecurity and the impact of looking after your estate and keeping it safe. That really sits with the board because of the reputational damage to the organization as a result of an attack.
Perfect. So as enterprise IT moves towards being an innovation driver, moves towards this systems of engagement, there's really three core principles which we see at AppDynamics, so talking to every kind of enterprise customer. Number one, software applications are central to enterprise success. We're all at an application performance conference here today, but here's the caveat. Applications are becoming more easier to consume at the front end. So developments over the last 10 years, we can talk about mobile, but now we can talk about voice activation. We can talk about things like Alexa. We can talk about AI, artificial intelligence. We can talk about augmented reality. All of these are actually making applications actually invisible to us as a consumer. But conversely, at the back end, things are becoming a lot more complex. It's harder to drive great availability and performance. We recently did a survey with IDC, and this survey was focusing on how complexity has changed from an application perspective in European businesses. We asked the question, how, if at all, has complexity changed over the last 12 months? And you can see the results up on the screen here. In British businesses, 79% said complexity had increased, 77% in France, and 52% in Germany. So across the board, complexity is definitely increasing. Aligned to this is process. It's about agility and quality. These are really non-negotiable. So many organizations which we see in Europe today, we're all adopting DevOps. We're all doing DevOps in some way or another. Even if we can't decide the definition of DevOps, we're moving towards agile practices. And 64% of EMEA enterprises are adopting DevOps. That's what we found in this survey last year. When it comes to cloud, cloud is no longer a case of, are we going to do cloud? Everyone's going to do cloud. It's not a case of, should we migrate to one particular cloud? It's about a multi-cloud strategy. Different application profiles suit different cloud environments. So 85% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy today. Then finally, going back to some of this complexity area, 79% of EMEA enterprises are utilizing microservices and containers. We saw that in the keynote this morning. Now, what's key why we're talking about this from a metrics point of view is that if you're focusing on metrics, your metrics from a top level, you need to be thinking about how do we promote agility in the business? How are we going to report back on this? How are we going to drive improvements when it comes to agility and also quality? Then thirdly, driving business outcomes is the ultimate measure of success. If you're going to move towards a systems of engagement approach, and there's no question that you are moving towards that approach, then what is the ultimate area of success? It's about driving business outcomes. 77% of enterprises in EMEA are strengthening IT's partnership with line of business to accelerate digital transformation. Today, the app is a business. We did a piece of research a couple of years ago, which was called the App Attention Span, where we found that 3 in 10 smartphone and tablet owners would change banks if a mobile app wasn't up to scratch. And in order to drive outcomes, then analytics becomes fundamentally important. Everyone gets excited about the analytics word. Everyone wants analytics. The reality is, what is analytics and what value does it provide? That's a whole question, a different question altogether. But nearly 2/3 of EMEA enterprises are leveraging analytics in some form of another. Today we'll talk about real-time analytics and all these kind of different aspects. But the reality is it's essential to focus on these areas. So if you're going to report on metrics, it's not about just uptime of applications. It's how do you report how those applications are driving business outcomes in your business. That's what's really key here, is aligning it back to the business. So those three principles in order again. Software applications essential to enterprise success, agility and quality are non-negotiable, and driving business outcomes is the ultimate measure of success. I want you to remember them because we're going to come back to them in our plan in the next section. So with that, let's focus on building a metrics plan for today's tech leader. Again, we're not going to provide you with a blueprint, we're going to provide you with some guidance about what areas that you need to cover and think about when designing your plan. I'm going to hand over back to Sharon for probably the most important step, actually, when you're looking at a metrics plan.
So the one thing that we did when we set out was to try and map out our customer journey, and I'm sure a lot of you have done that, and you really understand the touch points with every single customer at every single minute.
Actually, just a question, Sharon.
Yes,
has everyone actually looked at customer journeys, modeling them? Has anyone done this in their organization? I've got a couple of nods. Show of hands, who's done it?
A few.
Okay,
Yeah, quite
definitely a couple.
So I'm teaching you all to suck eggs, which is great. That's fine. So I'll talk you through a little bit. If you want to increase net present value for your web channel, that's one of the things you can look at. It's what are the steps that your customer goes through in order to get to buy something from you or to continue to transact with you, whatever your business might be. And you need to look at every single stage. And some of the things that we've discovered are our customers, the same person does very different things with our product at different times of the day on different devices. So in the morning, they're on their mobile phone, they're on their way into work, nice busy doctor, off to see a lot of patients. He gets to the hospital, the Wi-Fi doesn't work, there are no computers in the operating theatre, and he has to pop back to his office to his desktop computer, which is probably might still even be Windows XP, but will not be state-of-the-art machines unless you're in certain hospitals. And that restricts his access, or her access. You might see, and then when they're at home in the evening, they're watching TV and they're looking up on a tablet, something that they've seen in a patient that they've seen that day. And they might want to check back and just say, oh yeah, actually, that is what I needed to do. Or they think, I don't know how to do that, and so they'll go and do a learning module on one of our applications and remind themselves actually how they need to learn going forward. So that's a bit of an example about what we would do, but you need to be looking for insight in different places. Customer complaints are one of the most amazing sources of insight about how your products are really working, along with monitoring tools and applications, and really think about the new features that are requested by somebody. Are they actually adding value, or are they just the bells and whistles or the fluffy dice in the back to the car analogy and the go faster stripes down the side? Are they delivering value for the customer? And you go around that loop over and over again. And this is an example of what one of our customer journey maps looks like. We're a B2B publisher, so we want to make money out of the content we sell, and it all sits behind an access control system. And every single step we put in that access control system stops customers getting in and getting to our data. Every single piece of data we want to get from them is another barrier to get for them getting to what they want to do, which is to consume a piece of content. And we had no idea how complicated we made it for people until we started asking questions. We go out a lot. We spend a lot of time with staff, all sorts of staff, product owners, product managers, marketing, even down to our engineers, are out in GP surgeries. They are out in hospitals, and they are watching what people do, not just with our products, but with our competitors as well, because we need to understand where we're failing against the competition. We also bring people in. So every week, we have a little usability lab, and we have 2 junior doctors who take a week of their very busy training schedules, and they come and spend a week with us, and they sit in all of our meetings. And they tell us exactly what matters to them in the way in which they are practicing medicine today. And we do that in some of our overseas offices as well when we can. It's not the easiest thing to do remotely, but we try to make it work. And you go through and you draw out a picture, and this started as a series of scribbles on a nice whiteboarded wall. And then we printed it all out, and we actually worked out every single stage of our journey. And every single one of those orange Post-it notes is a problem area. And that then became our build schedule. So we are now sprinting quite fast to try and fix these problems before a major release in September of a new product that will have a distinctly smaller and less complicated login journey. And one of the reasons it's complicated is because of the world in which we work, which is academia, where there are very, very unique login systems that are very old and very archaic, and we have to interface those because that particular institution says, I want to use that authentication mechanism. And doctors don't like Facebook, because guess what? They don't want their patients to follow them. And if I was a doctor, I'd be the same. So we can't easily use some of the things that other people might go, why don't you just use a social login? Our market is not on social for its work. They might be on social for other things, and there are social places that doctors go. But those are, all of those business factors. It's nothing to do with technology. And you don't understand that until you, as I did a couple of days ago, spent a 12-hour shift with a consultant anaesthetist in a hospital in Scrubs, one of the most amazing days of my life. And I can tell you an awful lot more about how my customer works from following around all day. Love him. He put up with an awful lot of me asking questions. I was in the operating theatre. It was fab. But those are invaluable experiences that you can bring back and put on that whiteboard and go, well, they just won't do that. And you move on from that and you build that into your process and into your metrics.
So just before we kind of switch on, actually your customer journey, because I was in your offices a couple of weeks ago, and you've still got this on the board.
Yeah.
So anyone who comes in can actually see this end to end.
Yes.
Is it not the canteen, but it's in one of the...
In our collab, which is our
collab,
sort of big usability room, meeting room. We have all of our big staff meetings in that room. So, everything's very open and transparent, which again comes right back to our values.
Yeah.
It's a big part of what we are and what we do.
And how long did it take to actually piece this together, kind of end to end? So it looks like extremely complex from what I'm looking at.
I think if you get the right people in the room,
Yeah.
it's a couple of days. It probably a week. We've done a couple of followed a piece of technology called a Google Design Sprint. I don't know if anyone's used that methodology. Google it. It's very good, and that takes 5 days, end to end, and you can go from blank sheets of paper through to designed on prototyped product in 5 days.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is you need every stakeholder in the room. And that's usually the hardest thing, is trying to get that into everyone's diaries. So a lot of advanced planning is one of my top tips, especially if you want senior stakeholders, because we all have crazy diaries.
Yeah, it's about ownership as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
For everyone to agree on it.
Yeah.
And this is definitely, if you're looking at building a metrics plan, I started to write at the start by saying, okay, we need to focus on the behaviors which you want to drive. Well, ultimately, how do you even decide where to start? It is through understanding your user or customer journeys. That's a great place to start. And you start from an outside-in perspective. Start with the actual business problem, what you want to solve. Of course, working from AppDynamics, application performance monitoring, as well as kind of drawing out these customer journeys using Post-it notes, it's possible to actually monitor them as well. And if you're looking at monitoring best practices, you should be focusing at monitoring your customer journeys today. And so, how would I construct a metrics plan? How would you actually go about communicating metrics to your colleagues in the business? How would you go about communicating your metrics to your team? Well, I think there's 5 key areas in regards to communication. Firstly, and we've already touched on this, you need to start off with the business outcome. It has to be an outside-in approach. You've got to start off with that business problem. Think about the business problem. That's how you're going to drive value in enterprise IT. Then, you've got to link that to a specific tech initiative. So why are you doing this? We're not even talking about getting down to numerical values here. We're explaining this in simple English. So a very common metric, which we see a number, or very common initiative, which we see a number of enterprises focusing on now, is zero downtime. And they're trying to do this by a certain date. Well, if that's your initiative, what's your objective? What are you going to do to achieve this initiative, so eliminate unplanned outages? Then we can start looking at metrics. So what is your KPI? What is your lagging metric? When will you know that you're hitting this objective, this initiative? When will you know that you can report progress back to the business? And then finally, always think about the leading measurement. So how are you going to drive positive improvement? When you're having your weekly meetings with your team, your daily stand-ups, how are you going to drive them to start moving in the right direction? Well, this is where the leading metric comes in. So you could be focusing on mean time to identify, making sure you can speed up mean time to identify on severity 1 issues. That ultimately, from that point there, if we go back around, is going to improve ultimately our net promoter score. So always think about those 5 areas. So also think about is these 3 principles which I covered earlier. So as well as thinking about your business, also think about those fundamental shifts, those changes which are happening in every enterprise. The fact that software applications are absolutely key, performance and availability is without question. The fact that agility and quality, moving fast, innovating fast, is absolutely key. And the fact that if you're really going to be successful as a digital leader, it is about driving business outcomes. So always have them in the forefront of your mind, and then you can start building metrics plans like this. So let's go back to our business problem. So we're increasing our net promoter score for our web channel. We've already touched on one of them, which can align to this. 0 outages by 2020. Maybe another objective here will be reduced time taken to resolve P1 issues. A KPI then is a 50% MTTR time reduction year on year. How do you get to that? Again, mean time to identify time. You need to be reporting that back, promoting behavior to improve that score. Another factor, if you're going to focus on application performance today, well, application performance is equal to availability. A poor performing application is the equivalent of an unavailable application today. So delivering industry-leading app performance is critical. Application response is always 3 seconds or below. To be honest, this has to be specific to your application, to your user journeys through that application. Because 3 seconds is an industry benchmark, but different transactions require different speeds, because speed, performance, is all about perception. So you may want to focus on average page load time, less than 3 seconds. I can tell you one of the problems today when it comes to modern applications is that we've got a tendency to not to over-personalize, but to want to personalize, to use personalization scripts. Well, guess what? That provides a lot of benefit to the customer, but there's a fine balance. There's a budget which you need to balance here, because over-personalization actually increases page weight to an application, which is in detriment then to performance. So your measurement here to make sure you keep on track is page weight. Make sure it's less than 1 megabyte. Hard to do in today's kind of modern world, but that's how you're going to promote positive behavior. This is the way you're going to be able to talk then to marketing professionals. You want to put new scripts on your application to track user progress. And of course, if you're looking at any modern monitoring solution, that needs to help you track those metrics in real time. Number 2, agility and quality are non-negotiables. Again, using our increased net promoter score for the web channel, then increasing release cadence and quality is not a question today. It's something you need to do. It means eliminating rollbacks for major releases. So focusing on 0 rollbacks for major releases for application X. You know, one of the things when I was kind of working back in IT, it was actually when I was at Fujitsu a couple of years ago, we had problems on one account with rollbacks. So we'd go for a major release and we'd cause a rollback. It's not just a rollback which is a problem, it's the brand then which becomes a problem, because it's your brand as an enterprise IT department. How do you improve that? Number of testing use cases completed, making sure you're driving positive behavior in regards to this. Now, one area which I don't see many enterprise IT departments actually focus on is that if you're really going to go for agility and quality, yes, DevOps is important. Yes, an agile approach is important. Yes, getting Slack and different communication channels is important. But ultimately, what drives quality in enterprise IT? What drives quality in your business is its people. And so you need to make sure that you're building the A-star team, the A team. Avoid regrettable dev or ops attrition. Extremely important. As a digital leader, as an enterprise IT leader, you need to be tracking your key employees. You don't want to lose these. People move on. They do move on, but you need to really know about this. You don't want to be losing your key employees. So tracking stuff like job satisfaction scores also becomes important. And again, if you're looking at any kind of modern monitoring solution, the ability to be able to track quality with every release as it impacts performance is absolutely essential. Over back to you, Sharon.
So just to round up on the last one, driving business objective outcomes. So if you want to increase your customer retention, you need to think about every single point at which you are going to lose that customer, and back to that journey mapping. What can you do in terms of technology to make sure that you reduce that churn? And that may be increasing app usage. And a lot of that comes back to other colleagues. It's never, ever the technology department's job to fix this problem. It has to do it in collaboration with pretty much every other. You've got to have a great product. You've got to have a great marketing team that are telling people how great that product is. You've got to have a great sales team who are out there selling it. And you've got to have a great tech team that can build it and then to improve it every single day, of every single week, of every single year. So again, you need to think about solving customer problems. And that's something that with our collab that we've talked about earlier, that's what we do every single week, is we try and identify what the customer's problem is. They're not using one of our journals because they want to read it. It's not bedtime reading, most of the stuff we publish. They're using it because they either need to solve a problem for one of their patients, or they need to learn how to do something differently, or they need to change the way in which a team that within a hospital or within a doctor's surgery is practicing medicine. And ultimately, they need to make their patient better. And that's what will be driving them, which is why that's what drives us. And so understanding what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do that is critical to then understanding how you actually solve those problems, which is why we like to send our tech people out to meet our real customers. We also employ a lot of doctors as well, because they sit there and they tell people exactly what it's like to be on the front line. In an unusual business like ours, that's absolutely important, because most of us are not doctors. Yep. Thank goodness.
Just a quick show of hands then. Is anyone else practicing this then? Actually sending out their tech support staff to go and sit with customers, with users? One. Okay, a couple of shows of hands. It's good. I know at AppDynamics, our support engineers, every quarter, we actually encourage them, our development engineers, we encourage them to go and spend time with customers. So even on our product teams, we have them go out, actually go and sit in a support environment, see the problems when it comes to application performance. It helps us kind of refine that roadmap. So, and again, you need to be able to, if you're driving business outcomes, another aspect when it comes to modern monitoring is that ultimately you can be monitoring every single application metric there is, but great monitoring solutions today help you to focus and display and report progress back to the business. You can do this obviously in real time. That's absolutely key. So just in kind of recap, a way you may want to show your metrics plan, a way you may want to devise your metrics plan is something like this, which is on the screen. So always start off with your business outcome. What are you trying to drive from a business perspective? Make sure you cover these imperatives, but also then align your tech initiatives to that business outcome. That's the way you're going to be able to promote progress. And, of course, which is really important, make sure you always have leading and lagging metrics. So hopefully some of these examples have been useful. But in summary?
So just in summary, I think as we said throughout the presentation, you always start with that business outcome. What is it that your organization is trying to achieve, and how do you as a technology function help them achieve that? Understand your users before you start thinking about how you're going to measure and monitor. And finally, think about those holistically about those leading and lagging metrics. Think about that usual triumvirate of technology, process, and people, because it's going round that circle that will drive a lot of the change and deliver you a very successful metrics plan.
Perfect. So next steps. I know we've covered a lot of ground, First thing is, don't panic in the next 5 days. If you are looking at metrics, it is the most important element, and it's important. And your first attempt at actually reporting metrics is not going to be it could not be your best attempt, but it's about improvement. It's about moving on. Metrics are a great way of enabling that communication with business, with different colleagues. You know, focus on something different. Identify a business problem. Don't just focus on the IT side. Go back to that customer journey. Start with the problems from a customer perspective and align to them. In the next 30 days, actually start building out that customer journey. Go into your canteen and start putting it up on the screen. Get people to participate. Get people to question it. Get people to get the post-it notes and stick up the problems which they've seen from a customer perspective. Just get collaboration starting to work. Because while metrics help you drive to improvement, to where you want to go, it's about acceptance. It's about common context, those areas which we covered right at the start of this presentation. And with that, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to questions.
So just we've got about 5 minutes for the Q&A. We've got 2 helpful volunteers on either side of the room. So if you've got a question, if you could just stick your hand up so a microphone could come your way and just be patient, that would be fantastic. But yeah, got any questions from anyone in the room?
Sorry. So my name is Mahendra. How often this metric should be reviewed to baseline them properly? Because every time things will change, scenario will change.
For us, some metrics really don't change at all, and others we have had metrics in place for a year, and then after a year we're measuring the wrong thing. It's not driving the right behaviour, or actually it's not telling us anything, and so we've quickly dropped them and thought about what we need to do next. So each product has a metrics dashboard that goes to our executive every quarter. So we're not monitoring all the time because our world doesn't change that fast, and that may be different for other businesses. And then every year we sit down and say, are we measuring the right things? Have we seen a change? And then we start to adjust. But some we just keep because they're the most important things that we want to measure.
Yeah, and I think where you're leading metrics, you may need to change more frequently, because those are the real indicators about whether you're improving, whether you're going in the right direction. Your lagging indicators, say for example, mean time to resolution, unless you get 0 incidents, those are always going to be kind of in place. So your lagging metrics, those historical descriptive ones, are going to be more static, but it's your leading metrics which you really need to refine. That could be on a weekly basis. So when you're talking to your teams, you know, if it's not working for them, if it's not driving them in the right direction, it's not providing guidance, then you know that you need to change your leading metric.
Any other questions? No? Oh, down the front. Thank you.
Hiya. I don't know if I'm asking the right question, but I'm trying a metric that I've always come across as an issue is customer satisfaction, and how you measure customer satisfaction within a business environment. Because I mean, you can talk about complaints, but particularly some customers might not complain if they're not satisfied with the service. So how do you measure that? Is it to do with whether their desired outcomes have been achieved by the business, or what would you do to do that?
Well, I'll have a go at attacking that question. So if you're looking at customer satisfaction, it's actually what I've found in the past is that customers never praise you for kind of great work. Customers never praise you for great application performance. They only actually get in contact with you, and it's normally via Twitter and all the social networks, when there's a problem that occurs. So it's actually quite easy to capture dissatisfaction, in a sense. There's different techniques for capturing customer satisfaction, customer experience. I mean, you can look at the typical one, which is Net Promoter Score. So a series of questions, which is, would you recommend, I think one of them is definitely, would you recommend this product, this service, this application to your friends, to your colleagues, to your family? That's an easy one. With anything which you're doing when you're talking to customers, for me, or when or the user community, it has to be short, it has to be quick and easy to do, because no one's got time to provide feedback. But yeah, unless you've got a major problem, then you're going to hear about it.
I think I would add to that, I think some of it's monitoring. So they might not be talking to you about what they think, but they might be talking to somebody else. And so, looking at mentions, trying to understand where you're being talked about. I think always asking your customer or watching what they do. So, so we run an events business, and one of the most valuable ways for us to see is we have product demonstrations, we have our products on the show at those events, and we can talk to people, and we can just sit and watch them very quietly from afar and see what they do and how they do it. I think it's what they don't tell you, or what they tell you because they think that's what you want to hear. So lots and lots of our readers will tell us they read us every single week, and we know damn well they don't. But that's trying to understand, is it because they are too busy? Is it the format in which we're delivering that information? Are we making it hard for them to consume our product? And those are the sorts of questions that we ask. And I think you have to think about geography. You have to, we're an international business. We publish in English predominantly. Can they actually, all of those questions are business questions. And I think it's a range of questions that help you determine customer satisfaction. But unprompted feedback on your website in public is very delightful to get.
Yes.
All right, well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Sharon, John.
Thank you.
Brilliant presentation. Thank you.